The game Mouthwashing touches on an array of deeply emotional topics, following the tragic events that unfold on a Pony Express freight ship. Each character brings a unique perspective to the story, but today we'll be focusing on the ship's medic Anya. Who she was, what happened to her, and how she reacted to the world around her. Let's begin now with who Anya is as a person. There are many hints scattered around the game as to her personality apart from who she was presented through the eyes of Jimmy. We know that Anya takes her position as a nurse very seriously, and is upset when others don't respect her tasks on the ship, such as when Jimmy is messing around during his psych evaluations. A game dev Q&A revealed that she had previously failed to get into medical school 8 times, ran out of money, and then underwent the company's medic courses and joined the team in order to afford further attempts. It shows an incredible level of commitment to her goals, as well as makes you wonder what might have happened that she failed so many times. Swansea once mentions that she almost cuts her leg on a wrangled ventilation staff in the med room the first time they were trying to fix it, despite it being marked off, showing she might be a bit absent-minded even in her own office. This might be as a result of her always having things on her mind. We know from her Pixel conversation that she thinks deeply about the little things and finds it hard to ignore even little problems. We also know she's playful, joking about Swansea's angry note and being pleased to have successfully surprised Curly on his birthday. Interacting with the Sorry board pre-crash tells us that she looks forward to game nights. She gets very competitive, especially against Daisuke, who seems to be really lucky. Looking at the corkboard in her office, we can see she also enjoys photography, especially of nature and aesthetic vibes. Anya likes to draw, and she feels proud enough to sign some of her pieces, like this little flower with eye-like leaves. The board also has some silly doodles of the company mascot. It's not clear whether this one was hers or Daisuke's, who also likes to draw, but the fact that she kept it hung on the board is pretty cute. The creepy little Yimpy doodle was made by Daisuke and is actually meant to be Jimmy, which I just think is really funny that, I imagine Dai and Anya get a real kick out of it such that she actually keeps it up on the board all the time. I imagine it's still up, mostly because Jimmy either didn't notice it or doesn't realize it's making fun of him. Dai and Anya don't interact very much in the game, but we can see they have a genuine concern for each other's well-beings. Dai is frantic to help her post-crash, and Anya is worried about Dai's overly positive responses to her evaluations, suggesting that maybe something could be wrong because of them. And given their shared interest in art, makes me think probably they were decent friends. Anya is also pretty comfortable around Swansea, both enough to confide in him about Jimmy's horrible actions, as well as to jokingly reveal his love for the company's birthday cake right next to him. Anya repeatedly expresses an eagerness to find the good in people, is deeply affected by the pain of others, and has an interest in psychology, which she's been reading a lot about on the ship. The knowledge of psychology probably drove her in how she handled Jimmy post-crash, how she went about both avoiding context and placating his mood. She notably has a book entitled Up and Down, The Illusion of Choice on her desk, which others have explained references the developer's previous game, but also suggests she might feel a lack of control over her life. Finally, we know that Anya enjoys music, similar to Swansea, who both have a favorite playlist that they used to play on their radios, and that there was never any mention of family or friends, suggesting Anya might be alone in life, which is ideal for someone doing this long-term delivery position. Now, what happened to Anya? Over the course of the story, we come to learn that Jimmy sexually assaulted and impregnated her. While the exact details of how this came to be are kinda hazy, there are several hints in the game. We could immediately acknowledge that it was non-consensual, as Anya had previously expressed being uncomfortable with Jimmy, is concerned by her lack of ability to lock her bedroom at night, and becomes terrified when she finds she's pregnant, and spends the rest of the game on constant alert around him. One of the game's primary plot lines was the failure of Curly to protect Anya despite her informing him of how inappropriate Jimmy was being towards her. While we don't know how many times she was insulted, given the flow of the story and her emotional state, I would assume it went something like this. Jimmy was increasingly inappropriate towards Anya in ways that were disrespectful and very uncomfortable for a woman. But at the same time, were not violent or forthcoming enough for her to want to make a major fuss of it. Her initial conversation with Curly during the evaluations portrayed these facts. A. Jimmy was not respecting her or her task by not taking it seriously. B. He makes sexual jokes during their meetings, which is made worse given the evaluations were probably required to be one-on-one for privacy reasons. And C. Anya is hence hesitant to interact with him at all. Mouthwashing is super successful at portraying how these sorts of things are quietly ignored, as the dialogue that follows this exchange feels really natural. Curly says he'll do the evaluation for her, which is a nice temporary help, but then he goes to talk to Jimmy, he only mentions the inappropriate horse joke of being sexually attracted to cartoon horses in an equally joking and friendly way with like, "Hey Jimmy, has this always been a thing?" He accepts that Anya is uncomfortable, and he does the evaluation for her, which was nice, but he doesn't understand that he needs to actually confront Jimmy in some way. At no point during that discussion does he say, "Jimmy, that made Anya uncomfortable. Don't do it again. Take future evaluation seriously," or anything of the sort. This is all to say that there's a steady building over time of Anya and the crew getting used to the little harassments that Jimmy would make, while no real tisking or consequences were really given. In this way, Anya began to realize that her voice on the smaller scale was being ignored. But being a non-confrontational person, the situation at that point was not exaggerated enough to warrant pushing it. That is, till she finds out that she's pregnant. Now, if a violent fighting back assault happened on the ship, I can't imagine things would have not escalated way earlier than they did. I don't think Curly would have been so calm had he previously been told that she was sexually assaulted. So while we don't know exactly how the events went down, we do know one thing. Jimmy knows how to make a spiked drink, offhand, and has an eerie confidence that the person taking them would be A, perfectly fine afterwards, and B, forget everything once they wake up. Shown when he drugged Swansea. I believe the most likely scenario is that Jimmy, having thus far faced no real consequences, seeing Curly equally joke about the harassments he made, with his twisted concept of what he deserves and what qualifies as wrong, and as someone who views Anya as being insignificant and beneath him, may have been drugging her, sneaking into her unlocked bedroom at night, and assaulting her. Anya, therefore, would not have known what was happening, although perhaps getting suspicious when she asked about the bedroom lock, until the sudden realization of pregnancy, which then explains her intense breakdown in the cockpit. She herself was not aware of just how horrible Jimmy was willing to get, and Jimmy felt safe to do what he did since it seemed unlikely to be noticed. He probably thought, well, if she doesn't notice anyway, then I'm not really doing anything wrong. Hence why the whole concept of the problem being the baby and not what he did to Anya herself. This hypothesis makes sense both in all the hints that were given to us by the devs, and in why Anya went from mostly calm to having an emotional breakdown in one day. She had been keeping herself together during extended common workplace harassment that she could look past by mostly avoiding Jimmy, or thinking it was just one part of him as a person. Then everything came bubbling to a front all at once. So then, how did Anya react to what happened? The Anya we meet early in the game is terrified of Jimmy, understands what he can do, and begins using her knowledge of psychology to best defend herself. A person who both thinks themselves a god, smarter, stronger, and the most capable person in the room, while also hating themselves and their lack of success in life, is a dangerous person. They often don't know how to handle their emotions, and are at the same time easily angered by anything that makes them feel weak, judged, or wrong. This causes lashing out, as the easiest way to make oneself feel important is to put others down. So, somewhat like a DPS main that blames their supports for losing the game, simply because they weren't aware that the support had record-high healing, Anya had to protect herself from the outburst of a man-child. There were two primary ways to go about this. Let them put you down, accept insults apologetically to burn off their steam, or suck up to them, pumping up their ego so they aren't as angry, they're not in that mood as often. As far as Anya knows, she told Curly about her pregnancy, and then he tried to crash the ship. Even despite this non-logical portrayal, and perhaps a feeling of guilt herself or possibly having played a part in him trying to crash the ship, Anya does her best to keep Curly living, even in his horrendous condition. She cleans his bandages, she gives him painkillers, which given a lack of ability to swallow would mean shoving it down his throat, and does all of his day-to-day care, never once fighting against Jimmy when he claims that she's failing as a nurse. She takes what he throws, and then hypes him up when she needs to rely on him for something. Anya uses her bravery and desire to live to lead Jimmy into tasks that could help them all, while giving him the credit so that he feels useful. All throughout their future interactions, Anya is balancing an act of not angering Jimmy, while at the same time trying to behave normally and look past his horrible aspects. If she fought back, who knows what would happen? There's nothing to be done but try to keep living normally, until rescue arrives. Even still, the situation at large is horrible for her. She's trapped with her abuser, alcohol is soon added into the equation when they unlock the mouthwash, and the only other person she has to rely on are Swansea and Daisuke. Daisuke is anxious enough as it is, and I'm sure she would never want him to know about or have to deal with her situation. shown when she lies about the medbay being jammed, and in how she told Swansea but not him about the assaults. She's just a kid after all. She did inform Swansea of the pregnancy, likely during the cockpit late night scene, which probably also included talking about the cryostasis pods. Swansea, of course, is stuck in a hard place there. At the point in which rescue is still an option, he likely told her it's best to play it cool and wait until things are no longer trapped to act on the crimes. Anya and his discussion might have been him offering the advice and calming down Anya, who had been getting emotional in her fear. It can also be noted that Anya's sleeping pad in the lounge is always made, either suggesting she's just a tidy person, or that she perhaps began sleeping in the medbay after the crash, under the guise of caring for Curly, since she was able to lock it. Jimmy would be unlikely to act against her if she was with Curly or otherwise not alone. The story comes to a head when Anya locks herself in the medbay, trying first to keep Daisuke out of it, but then admitting that she is sick of living as they are now, having lost confidence in any hope of being saved and knowing that her being alive might compromise Daisuke's ability to take the one functioning cryopod for himself, which Swansea was probably saving for him. She elects to make her own final choice. She fixes the problem of the baby, as Jimmy had wanted her to when she first confronted him about being pregnant, which I'm sure must have been terrifying to do alone. She does this by overdosing on painkillers. She chose to no longer live in fear, under Jimmy's aggressive concept of being everybody's hero. Even if the crash had never occurred, you can imagine how terrified she must have been at the idea of having to undergo an unsafe abortion or give birth on the ship, with no other medical staff to help, and with the only options being 4 men, her abuser, someone she views as an innocent child and she wouldn't want to traumatize, an older co-worker, and Curly, someone she seems to really respect. It would have been dangerous to say the least. Even having to push Curly to take the pills while personally traumatized by the idea of someone being physically forced to do anything would have been really hard, especially with the nausea of pregnancy, which Jimmy knows about and also caused, but still puts her down about it. It is interesting that throughout the many months of the game, Anya does not visibly get a baby bump. This was most likely due to the fact that, game-wise, it would probably give away the reveal a little too early. But some commenters have also pointed out all the further along points in the game are seen through Jimmy's eyes, and he, being an unreliable and insane person, might have been actively blocking any sign of the baby's existence. All this to say, Anya was a caring person who, while a bit absent-minded, was well-read and artistic. She wanted so bad to be a doctor, to help people, that she spent every dime she earned in pursuit of that dream. In the end, she was forced to adapt herself to the force that was Jimmy, serving as an intriguing example of how harassment can fly under the radar, of how even seemingly small acts of discomfort can cause a tremendous amount of stress for a person. Her voice was not acted on, in a way that I could see naturally happening in the world even when Curly was a well-meaning guy. Anya was a victim. He was also a great nurse, friendly co-worker, and a kind person. I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. If you're interested in seeing more, check out my video on the game at large, or my playthrough, where I went through it blind. Is there anything that I missed, or someone else that could have used it extended the video? As a quick note, Anya's design was actually heavily inspired by Shelley Duvall.